Did you know your computer could have been running malicious code and you didn't even know about it? Today I want to talk about one more security vulnerability that I learned about after making the previous video. Very interesting. I wanted to make a separate video just talking about that. So if you're into that, let's talk about it. So today I want to talk about polyfill.io. And in order to understand what that is and how it actually affects people, we need to talk about tools. Yes, the old good-fashioned physical tools, drills, saws, and things like that. So if you know, there is a brand called Porter Cable, and that brand used to make drills and reciprocating saws and all kinds of quality tools made in America. But over time, that brand wasn't doing so good, and they went out of business. And the last thing they did before going out of business is they sold their name to another company that was manufacturing tools offshore. And what happened is now another company is making tools under the name of Porter Cable and is selling them in America. And what happens is if you go to the store now and you say, oh, I remember I had this really good Porter Cable tools, I've used this, my father or grandfather had them, I want to get another one of those. You'll go and buy one of their tools only to realize they're complete junk. They've been completely built for lower quality standards. They don't last, they're no good, and it's what's called a ghost brand. Quality brand's been sold to a budget company, and now they're making absolute garbage and they're selling it under a reputable name. And they rely on people who know the brand to buy those junk tools. And that's basically their plan, to see what they can get away with, how many tools they can sell, and maybe people will be okay with that or not. But it's not the same brand that people are used to. So what does this have to do with security, you may think? Well, programmers, they also use tools. So if you're building any kind of application, you never start from scratch. You always use someone else's API, some kind of add-ons, toolkits, and so on. Especially if you do front-end web development. I'm sure you heard of jQuery. It's like an add-on that you can embed into your website so you could do more cool JavaScript stuff, right? And by now, number of these packages that people add to their website completely exploded. Websites could have like dozens of those packages, and people may install them just because they do one cute little thing, like, oh, this can do shadows like that, let's install this package. Oh, and this one can make letters animated like that, let's install that package. And so developers install lots and lots of these different packages to build their website. And I'm sure by now you start to see where I'm going with this. So Polyfill.io was one of those tools that developers used to add to their toolkit and embed in the website in order to do whatever it is they needed done. But this tool was sold to a Chinese company. And what the Chinese company did is they added some malicious code to their package. So now everyone who is using that Polyfill.io downloads that malicious code, and that code runs on end user's computer. And I'm sure you're thinking like, wait a minute, this is a little crazy. And yes, it is. Polyfill.io runs on at least 100,000 websites, and numbers saying it could be up to 300,000. So there is a good chance you've been on a website that used that component, that downloaded malicious code from a Chinese website, and they ran that code on your computer. But then you may be thinking, well, maybe I did, but how come my computer isn't infected? Well, the way JavaScript execution works in a web browser is the code that runs actually runs in a sandbox, like a virtual machine. So any code you download runs in that, restricted environment. And that makes you feel a little better because, all right, well, then it's not a big deal if that code does that. And theoretically, yes, you have a sandbox where random code runs, even malicious code can run, but it can't do anything because it's not able to get out of the sandbox. But that might be where the strategy is. All right, so what I said before was all a fact. Now let's talk about theory, what things could be, what they could do. So anything going forward is unconfirmed. And the idea is running this code to begin with is to potentially find some kind of vulnerability in that sandbox. So imagine that you have a code that runs in a box, but every time it runs, it kind of knocks on the wall of the box. It's looking for cracks, it's looking for problems, it's seeing if there is a place somewhere where it can get out. Maybe there is a vulnerability of sorts and it's trying to find it and exploit it. Now, the other interesting thing about this JavaScript is it lives on that company's server or whatever server on the internet. So if there is some kind of vulnerability happen to be discovered about that virtual machine that runs the code, well, that company can modify their code to exploit that. And all they have to do, modify it on their server, and then as soon as a person goes into one of those 100,000 websites, that new code will get downloaded, ran, and it will exploit that functionality instantaneously. So it's a perfect way of delivering malicious code to a user. Now, again, we don't know if it can do anything bad, and so far it doesn't seem like it can. But there is that possibility that it's always trying, it's always working to find the way out of that sandbox. And if there is any vulnerability to discover, it's basically going to jump right out of it because of how this whole thing's been organized. So as of right now, we don't really need to worry about this because there are no known vulnerabilities for that virtual environment where JavaScript code runs. Also, Polyfill.io has been removed from most of the websites, I believe, or it's being removed at the moment that you are seeing this video. So nothing bad happened, but this also underscores an interesting problem where a developer could use a certain API, a certain toolkit to build their application. And that API could have been reputable software developer who's been supporting that and making sure it was good. But at some point, they may have sold that project to somewhere else, and then developers keep using that API where a bad actor could have injected some kind of malicious code. And there's no developer above this. Everyone uses APIs, everyone uses different toolkits. If you go to your C program files and you find folder with your software, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of DLLs from different companies. In fact, that's how you can figure out what APIs the other companies are using, so you could, steal some ideas. Anyway, all these DLLs sit there and they're being managed by different companies, and you as an end user don't know if they're trustworthy or not, even though you could be trusting the original developer who published the software. So I hope you found interesting how bad actors can exploit third-party APIs to purchase them, inject malicious code, and distribute it to lots of people on the internet. Thank you for checking out this video. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you on another.